Hi, I'm Ray, back with another podcast episode. This time all about planning permission. Now you might think, well, that's boring, but there are some interesting stories where people have tried to con the local council and find a way round planning permission. But just before that, Kirsty, remember Kirsty from North Carolina? She sparked off last week's episode actually by asking about English, British sayings like I'll go to the foot of our stairs and stone the crows, all that sort of thing. She's come back, she liked the episode, so thanks for that, Kirsty, and she's come back to me and said in America they have some oddities, whereas here we say, or we used to say, it's 5 20 past 3, for example. They will say it's 25 past 3, but at 3:30 they say it's 30 past 3. Now that's interesting, and apparently they don't say midday, 12 o'clock as we would say here for midday. Midnight's different, but midday we say it's 12 o'clock. Apparently in America they say it's noon. There we are, noon. Apparently they never say 12 o'clock. So that's interesting, Kirsty. Thank you for that. There were one or two other things, but I've forgotten what they were. Sorry about that. So, okay, that's interesting. If anyone else has got any little snippets from their country, wherever you are in the world, about little sayings or where they've come from, I'd be interested in that. Just from watching American TV programs, I've noticed that where we would say, I don't know if there's a number of something, perhaps 1,600, in America you would say 1,600, or if we're going to say 2,800, you would say 2,800. That's interesting as well. A lot of little things like that. Anyway, that's enough. That's all about last week's episode. Let's get on with this one, planning permission. Now, back in the 50s, now I do remember this even though I was a child, I do remember people talking about it. Do you know, you couldn't even hang out your washing in the back garden, put up a washing line, hang all your underwear and whatever out in the washing line. That was against the council's rules, regulations or whatever. You couldn't do that. Of course, people did, and the council obviously let it go by because what could you do? Same with television aerials. Television aerials, you weren't allowed to have an aerial on your chimney or anywhere on the roof of your house. Television aerials were against the planning regulations. But of course, again, what could the councils do? Millions of people all over the country are putting up TV aerials, so they couldn't go around telling them all to take them down. That wouldn't have been good. But there were a lot of things like that. Sheds, for example. I remember garden sheds. Really, you had to go to the council and say, look, I want to put up a garden shed. It's this size, it's going there in the garden, and almost show them plans, which, thinking back now is ridiculous. It's interesting to think how things have changed. I mean, these days people put up garden sheds wherever they like. Planning permission has changed. It's slackened off a lot. I believe now you can put up something on the back of your house, like a conservatory, a lean-to, an enclosure, and you don't need planning permission. Don't quote me on this, but I think if it's no more than 3 meters out from the house, doesn't go past the sides of the house, all that sort of stuff, you can sort of stick one on the back of the house. Of course, planning permission it does make sense. It is good, because otherwise, if there was nothing, you'd get people perhaps building a 3-story extension on the back of their house, and the next door neighbour's garden just gets no sunlight whatsoever. It's almost in the dark. So I think it's a good thing to have planning permission. Down in the Mediterranean countries, being a radio amateur as I am, I notice these things. There's all these properties with massive aerials on top, huge aerials kind of hanging over the buildings. I think mainly CB aerials plus amateur radio, and towers and that people have put up. There's obviously no planning permission. I mean, if you're in Spain or Portugal, Greece, let me know. I'd be interested. Is there any planning permission? It seems that people can put up what they like. Now, as I say, I'm a radio amateur. It would be nice if I could put aerials all over the place. Of course, there's planning permission here. And it's not only that. Well, the council say, I wouldn't want to upset my neighbours. I don't want to put a 100-foot tower in the back garden and upset all the neighbours. Regardless of what the council would say. But there are ways round planning permission. Now, I remember a friend of mine. He wanted to build a brick workshop at the end of his garden. Not so much a workshop, it was a den. He was going to have a TV in there, electricity, a bit of a workshop one end. It was more of a den where the kids could go and where the family could just chill out. He was a builder and he wanted to build this brick building. I think it was about 20 feet by 10 feet, something like that, and whatever tall it was. It was quite a well-to-do area, and because he did have some money, this chap. Jack was his name, I'll never forget him. And his next door neighbour said, "Oh, yeah, what are you doing, old boy?" It was quite a posh area. "What are you doing, old boy?" Looking over the fence through the bushes, because Jack had laid this concrete base, huge concrete base. And Jack said, "Oh, I'm going to put a brick building here. A bit of a workshop one end and TV the other end, just for the kids and the family." And this chap said, "Oh, well, you'll need planning permission for that, don't you know?" And all this business. Apparently this chap used to work for the council and he knew all about planning, which was a bit of a problem. Now, Jack's garden was very long, so you couldn't see it from the street. There were trees overhanging where he was building the workshop. There were bushes all round. You could only see it really if you kind of leaned over the garden fence and strained your neck a bit. Now, that's perhaps one of last week's sayings should come. Wind your neck in. Perhaps he should have said that to the neighbour. Now, the thing is, he had to go to the council because this neighbour, he would have caused problems. So Jack went to the council and he said, "I want to build this brick." No, but it's going to be a brick. No. That was that. They said, "You can have a shed." "Oh, thank you very much. I'll have a shed then." He said, "Can I have a concrete base?" Because he'd already put the base down. "Oh, yes, that's fine. Yeah, you can have a concrete base and a shed." So that's what Jack did. He went out and bought a huge shed. That's typical of the council though, isn't it? "I want to build a..." "No." "Yes, but no." Anyway, he put this shed up. This huge shed. What was it? I think it was at least 20 feet by 10 or whatever. As I say, he had some money, so he wasn't bothered about that. This lovely shed, I remember it was cedar wood, really nice, expensive shed. And the neighbour looked at him, "Oh, jolly good show, old man, jolly hockey sticks," and all this nonsense, all this rubbish. He was pleased. The council were okay. I mean, they didn't go and inspect the shed, but everything was fine. Now, the old boy next door, he used to go away at Christmas. It was winter time. He used to go away at Christmas for 2 weeks. He stayed with his sister or something. So Jack, being a builder, he had one of his trucks came round, dropped off a load of breeze blocks. Now, they're building blocks, I think they're called these days. They're about a foot by 9 inches, or big blocks. And what did he do? You know what he did, don't you? You know what I'm going to say. Inside the shed, he built, on the concrete base obviously, his brick building. He put in double glazed window in line with the shed window, double glazed door in line with where the shed door was, and the roof. What he had to do, he had 2 weeks to do this. What he had to do was take the shed roof off. That was an apex type pointed roof, and on the brick building he wanted a sloping roof. I forget what that was made out of. So he had to take the shed roof off. He put the sloping roof on the brick building, put the shed roof back. Inside he did all the dry liner stuff. He had electricity there. He even ran water down there, so he had a little kitchen sink in one corner. I don't know what he did about the drain for that, probably a soakaway or something. He had some help from the people, the building lads he employed. They were around there as well, because I remember going and having a look. And there's about 4 of these other lads all doing brickwork and goodness knows what. So the whole thing was done within the 2 weeks. And when the neighbour came back, he didn't know any different, of course. He just saw the shed as it was. A council chap came round. I remember him telling me, about a month or 2, I think 3 months, something like that. And he said, "Oh, just unofficial, I was just passing, just wonder whether you'd put your shed up." They were obviously checking up on him. So Jack said, "Yeah, luckily it was pouring with rain." So Jack said, "Yeah, come through." Took him to the kitchen and said, "There it is, down the garden, there's my shed." Of course, the chap didn't say, "Oh, I need to go and inspect it." It was pouring with rain, not very nice weather at all. And he could see the shed. What else? What else did he want to see? The brick building inside? Fortunately not. So off he went. The council were happy, the neighbour was happy, and that was that. It was something like 15 years later that the neighbour, the old boy, I think he went to live with his sister. I think that's what Jack said. The house sold, new people moved in. While the move was going on, while the house was empty, Jack took the shed down. He took it down, got rid of that. I think he sold it because it was a nice shed. the outside of the building, because they'd not been able to get to the outside brickwork. He rendered it, first with cement. He put cement all over it, and then he painted it camouflage, like the brown, the green and the black, like tanks and things in the army have. He painted it all camouflage, and honestly, I remember seeing it, and it really did blend in with the bushes, the overhanging trees. You could see it, obviously. It had double glazed windows and door, but it really did look good. And no one ever said anything. I lost touch with Jack. He moved away. As far as I know, the building's still there now. So that was one way to get round council planning permission. I won't bore you, but there was this other chap, a friend of Jack's. He did a similar thing. He got the idea from Jack and his shed. He wanted a caravan at the end of his garden, an old caravan. You can pick them up quite cheap if they're not roadworthy. The outside of them can be all horrible and dented. They're only aluminium, aren't they? They look a bit rough, but inside they can be very nice. So he wanted a caravan at the end of the garden. And of course, neighbours, oh, no, you're not doing that. And the council, no, you can't do that. It's funny because people can park a caravan in the front garden, I suppose because it was a permanent fixture. I don't know. All councils are different, aren't they? You can do one thing in that area, but not in another area. So this chap did the same thing as Jack. He put a concrete base down. One winter evening, pitch dark, him and his mates wheeled this caravan down the side of the house, down the back garden, plonked it on the concrete base and put a shed up round it. And I remember Jack saying that the neighbours were shocked. Where's that shed come from? He said, I did that overnight. But that's another way around it. And of course, the neighbours were fine about a shed. No one's bothered about a shed, are they? So you wonder how many sheds are around concealing naughty things like caravans, brick buildings, illicit stills, distilling gin and whiskey. No, I don't suppose it's that bad. We never know. There was another chap I knew when I was a kid, next door neighbour. They had a very small shed in their garden, very small shed, when they moved in. And after a couple of years, they decided to take it down. It was only about 6 feet by, 3 feet? Tiny little thing. It was all rotting and falling apart. And after a couple of years, they were having all the garden done. He took the shed down. There was this hatch in the floor of the shed, a sort of hatchway, which he didn't think anything of. He just filled the shed with rubbish. Anyway, when they moved the shed, there were steps down. It must have been an old air raid shelter. There were steps down to this big sort of concrete room underground. I mean, there was no planning permission needed for that, but he'd been there 2 years and didn't even know that. He knew there was a hatch in the shed floor, but he never bothered to lift it up because he didn't think anything of it. It was only, as I say, after the 2 years when he took the shed down. And of course, what the shed was doing, it was keeping the water, the rain, off the steps. When he went down there, he went down with a torch. I went down and had a look as well. It certainly wasn't that old. It had been built, he reckoned, in the last sort of 20 or 30 years. So it wouldn't have been an air raid shelter, or if it was, it had all been lined with concrete and all redone. It wasn't at all damp. There was some furniture down there. He said there was a chair, an old table, bits and pieces, and it was a lovely den. There was electric light down there. It didn't work because the wiring down to the place had since perished, but he had it wired. He put electricity in there. He put a new shed over the top of the stairs. So that was it. He got himself a den, and he'd not even known it was there. Just before I go and leave you in peace, just one more thing quickly. Back in the 1960s, a friend of mine, I remember in the workshop, he told me about one of his neighbours. He'd gone to the council. He wanted a lean-to on the back of his property. And the council said, no, you're not building anything on the back of the house, blah, 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 for whatever reason, you're not doing that. Now, the council, I don't know whether they still do, they used to hire aeroplanes and go around taking photos of people's back gardens to see what they built. I can hear an aeroplane now. Can you hear that? I can hear an aeroplane. They're probably coming to see how many sheds I've got. So anyway, this chap went home and he built a lean-to. You know, it's like a roof, isn't it? And whatever against the back of the house. He built this roof and the rest of it. Of course, the council eventually came round and said, you were told you can't have a lean-to and you've built it. He said, no, I haven't. And the council chap said, look, we know you have. You know, you've built a lean-to. So the chap said, OK, come through and have a look. Went out through the kitchen. They went out through the kitchen door onto the patio. And the chap said, well, there it is. He said, we're standing under the lean-to now. There it is, with the corrugated type plastic roof. And the chap said, that's not a lean-to. The council chap looked at it. Do you know, it was about 6 inches away from the house. It was a sort of self-standing, stand-alone or whatever, 4 legs with this plastic sort of roof. And it wasn't against the house. And the council chap apparently said, look, you can't do this. It is, to all intents and purposes, it's a lean-to. And the chap said, no, you told me I wasn't to build anything on the back of the house. And he said, I haven't. I don't know what happened. I don't think the council could do anything from what I remember. I suppose eventually the chap edged it sort of an inch a month towards the back of the house and finally sealed along the roof to the brickwork. And that was it. It was a proper lean-to. But yeah, I do remember that one making me laugh. Anyway, I've bored you enough. Thank you for listening as always. Look out for next Sunday's podcast episode. Don't know what it's going to be yet. Perhaps we'll hear from Kirsty. Perhaps we'll hear from someone down the Mediterranean. That would be nice, about planning permission. Or perhaps someone else has got an idea. Let me know. Thanks for listening as always. Take care and I shall see you next time. Bye bye for now.